Good afternoon. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. I'm joined by Ken Jenkins, our Deputy County Executive. This is Thursday, November 19th, and this is our second COVID update of the week to outline the status of the coronavirus outbreak here in Westchester County. We have moved to reporting twice a week now. We had gone quite a number of months reporting once a week, and then after the beginning of this crisis, when we were reporting daily, we felt the need to ratchet it back as the conveyance of information was less intense. Now that we're seeing an increased spike, which could very well be the second wave of coronavirus, we now have added a second later in the week update to keep you posted, not only on the status of the numbers, but the status of our activities to deal with the numbers. So we'll deal with, first of all, what we have received from New York State in the tracker, which is available for everybody to see, New York State DOH, Department of Health website. It outlines a number of different metrics in that situation, and we pull out of that Westchester County specific information to give you an idea as how the state sees the crisis. At this point, the most recent information we have is as of yesterday, 45,335 total coronavirus infections over the course of the pandemic. 41,360 represent those that have gone through a 2-week period of time having been diagnosed with COVID and completed that period of incubation. That leaves us with 3,975 active cases of coronavirus, and as we've reported in the last couple of reports, that number is dramatically up from where it was earlier in the year. The number of 3,975 1 week ago was 2,502. So the increase of 1,700 active cases in the space of a week represents almost a doubling of cases, from 2,500 to 3,900 in the space of a week. If you go back just 2 weeks ago, which was right after Election Day, not that long ago in our memory, the total number was 1,666, and that was less than half of the number of active cases that we have as of today. That means that more people have tested and been infected by COVID over the last 2 weeks than over the prior periods of time, and that's why the active case number continues to rise. Most recently, we tested in a single day 7,332 individuals, and we had 360 of them test positive for COVID. That is just below a 5% infection rate. During our periods in the summertime where we had low statistics, low spread of the infection, we were under 1% infection, and now with this particular day, we had a 5% infection ratio. That number does not stay the same day to day. We look at a rolling 3-day average. Sometimes it's a little up, sometimes it's a little down, but it is certainly concerning that we reached a 5% infection rate, which means out of every 100 people that are tested, 5 come up as positive for COVID. Now, 5 out of 100 as a percentage is a small number of absolute cases. When you're now testing 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 people, it gets you 300 to 400 cases, new cases, every day. That will take 2 weeks to work through the incubation period. So again, as of this report, 3,975 cases. When I last reported to you on Monday, that number was 3,515 cases. So we've gone up 400 cases over the space of a couple of days. We have our last hospitalization number is dated by an extra day. 135 people were hospitalized right now for COVID. That's the highest number that we have in hospitalizations since the spring. From the week prior, that number was 101 hospitalizations. So 34 hospitalizations over the last week. We reported a number of 129 the last time we were with you, so that increase in 6 hospitalizations. That is not a very high number, but it is a continual rise in the number of infections that have now found their way into a hospital setting. Concerns that you're seeing around the country in many of the rural parts of the country where hospitals are being overtaxed by the number of COVID patients is not yet the case in Westchester. The magic number for us is 3,100 hospital beds, 260 ICU beds, and that assumes a full mobilization of Westchester County Center, which has been set aside now for the bulk of the year as backup hospital facilities. They have 110 beds available there. All of them are capable of being upgraded to ICU beds, so 3,100 is the maximum number. Right now, the number of 135 hospitalizations does not come close to taxing our situation. However, there is usually a 2-week lag between the increase in infections and the amount of people that are hospitalized and then the amount of people that we lose in fatalities. So we do not take great comfort because we have seen a steady rise in the number of hospitalizations, admittedly not as steep as the proportionate rise in the number of active cases. So we will hope for the best and hope that our hospitalization rate does not rise. Currently, it's slightly under 4%. That hospitalization rate was in the 15 to 20% ratio in the spring off of the same number of active cases. Fatalities, as of the last report, is 1,493 individuals that have died from COVID. That is 11 more than was a week ago when we last reported the number. From earlier this week, 3 fatalities when we reported 1,490 in our last report. As I have made the comparison, losing 11 people in a week is exactly equal to the number of people that we lost during the whole summertime months of July and August. Together, we lost 11 people then. We've lost 11 people in the last week, so the fatality numbers are rising. However, again, we are not close to the degree of fatalities that we had in the spring, which truly was horrific. We're watching these numbers. There's no question that there's a continuation of growth, but at this point, we have not yet reached the full peak as we saw it in the March and April period of time. New York State is one of the 5 states that has the lowest infection rate in the nation right now. So even though we're rising, our infection rates are much less than many other states, and there seems to be a correlation between those states that really never had much of a first round in the spring that are now feeling a much fuller force of the coronavirus impact. And I've watched, as you have, national television in the upper Midwest and some of the rural states of the South. These numbers are much higher as a percentage of the total. New York still has a lower percentage of infection compared to some of those, given the fact that we've already gone through a very tough first wave here in this area. What these numbers have led to is Governor Cuomo announcing additional yellow zones that track higher infection rates here in Westchester County. He certainly announced them all over the state. For our purposes, we focus on Westchester. You will note that he originally named a little over a week ago Port Chester as a site for a yellow zone where their infection rate had peaked up at a very high level, and he subsequently moved it to the next level of severity, the orange zone. I'm going to explain what those zones represent again in a second. But it's yellow, orange, red. Red is the most severe status and has the most severe and restrictive shutdowns. But Port Chester remains in the orange zone, and Port Chester by itself, with some of the neighboring village of Rye Brook affected by that zone area. He announced today that there were yellow zones that have been designated in the city of New Rochelle, the town and village of Ossining, the village of Tarrytown, and the adjacent village of Sleepy Hollow, within part of the city of Yonkers and within the city of Peekskill. Let me hasten to say at the outset that in the cases of each one of these communities, the whole community is not under yellow zone designation. There are certain areas within those communities. Now, Yonkers, of course, is our largest city, over 200,000 people in population. Parts of 2 zip codes were identified within the yellow zone designation. In the city of New Rochelle, there are 3 zip codes, and there's a fairly linear north, south, and central business area to the community. It is in the 10801 zip code, which is the heart of New Rochelle, the center part of New Rochelle, that has been designated within this yellow zone. In the village of Ossining, it is primarily the heart of the village of Ossining, not all of the village, that's included. Some of the town outside the village of Ossining, that's how they refer to the unincorporated section of Ossining in that area. And Briarcliff Manor, part of which is in the town of Ossining, is not affected by this zone designation. And the village of Tarrytown and the village of Sleepy Hollow have their most concentrated sections that are included in the zone. And between Route 9 to the Hudson River is the most concentrated portion of population in the village of Tarrytown, and in the village of Sleepy Hollow, the yellow zone covers both of those 2 communities. I might add that to confuse matters more, Tarrytown is a village within the town of Greenburgh. Adjacent to it, Sleepy Hollow is a village in the town of Mount Pleasant. So to the extent that town governments are involved in those 2 particular villages, as they are in some other ones, that is a factor. And then finally, the city of Peekskill has its more congested urban area, more densely populated area, part of the yellow zone that's been established to Peekskill. Now, these targeted restrictions, these zones that have been created, do not restrict the individual movement in and out of the zones. When people hear of a zone, just as they did back in the beginning of the year where there was a containment zone announced for the city of New Rochelle, people think there is a checkpoint Charlie scenario where you cannot enter the zone unless you're interdicted by, someone in the medical field or someone in the law enforcement community. That is not the case. The yellow zones highlight where there is a concentration of infection, and therefore those of us in government, in the world of not-for-profits, business community, clergy, we are now tasked with putting additional effort to try to reduce the infection into that area so that we will not see it expand further and then potentially cause the life-threatening realities of COVID. But the yellow zones do not restrict in this level as a precautionary zone, does not constrict your movement in or out. You are not somehow identified in a negative light because you live inside one of these yellow areas, and you are not prohibited if you are outside that area from moving in and out of the zones. There are certain specific things that involve restrictions in yellow zones. I'm going to cover them in a second. But keep in mind that these 5 that were just announced today, New Rochelle, Ossining, Tarrytown, Yonkers, and Peekskill, we have begun the process of working with those communities prior to the announcement today by the governor. We have had a community conference call yesterday with key leaders in the Ossining community, as I've mentioned, people from the clergy, people from the not-for-profit world, as well as government officials, some representatives of the business community. We have a similar call that was pre-scheduled already for Peekskill today. We have one scheduled next week for the Tarrytown Sleepy Hollow community, in which we're going to talk through with the decision makers what types of efforts are necessary in order to reduce the spread, what kind of activities specifically to get public information out to the people that need to have it. How do we best deliver that? Is there a language issue in a community or within the target area? What do we do about delivering PPE, personal protective equipment, primarily masks, for civilian use? Also, how we handle the hand sanitizer that goes with that as being an important task, and a number of other activities that would happen. In both the city of Yonkers and the city of New Rochelle, which are our 2 largest cities, we have been in contact with the mayors, Mayor Mike Spano of Yonkers, Mayor Noam Bramson of New Rochelle. They will identify the game plan that applies in their city. It is not the whole of their city that are affected, so they will figure out how to target and customize their response. And Westchester County and all of our resources, the Emergency Services Department, the Public Health Department, and so forth, will be brought to bear as a partner working with the city of Yonkers and the city of New Rochelle within these zones. The categories and what they mean are as follows. The yellow zone designation, which applies to the 5 communities I mentioned today, creates a couple of restrictions. First of all businesses are open. Retail businesses, restaurants, they remain open under yellow zone circumstances. You are aware that the governor passed a rule that all restaurants and bars had to be closed by 10 o'clock. That is a broad-based rule that applies whether you are in the zone or not. But that 10 o'clock restriction exists across the board, not just in the yellow zone. They do identify that in houses of worship, in churches, in synagogues, and in mosques, that the capacity must be limited to 50% of the capacity of the house of worship. So if you have 1,000 people that can fit inside the sanctuary of your religious institution, only 500 is permissible. That comes under the yellow zone designation. There is a maximum for non-essential gatherings, social gatherings, of 25 people. The normal maximum that had been created previously was 50 people. But under yellow designation in these communities, plus Portchester, there's a reduction in the number of people. Yellow zone capacity is 25 people. For restaurant purposes, dining purposes, indoor and outdoor dining is permitted under yellow zone designation. This is not a mandatory closure of the restaurants. It is a reduction in the number of people that can dine at a table. So having 10 people around the table is not permissible. Having separate tables of up to 4 people per maximum is permissible under the yellow zone designation. And then for the school districts, schools remain open based on whatever the strategies are for that school district. Some school districts have full in-school education, some have fully remote education, and some have a hybrid in the middle where students come in part of the week or 1 week and then not the consecutive week. They have different strategies in different school districts based on the decisions that are made locally. The requirement under yellow zone designation, those schools can continue on whatever that strategy is that they've had, but they must test the students and the staff to make sure that the infections are not spreading through the school system, and there's a metric to do that. This is where the county is trying to be helpful with the school districts to be able to set up partners in the healthcare field and access to testing kits so that testing can be done properly. It is a daunting process the bigger the school district is. Yonkers has 27,000 school children. That is a lot of people to have to deal with. When you look at New Rochelle, there are about 11,000 school district students, and then those numbers drop into single digits in some of the other districts. But under yellow designation, 25 people maximum indoors, outdoors, 50% capacity in houses of worship. All businesses are open. Schools are open with mandatory testing for COVID, and then indoor and outdoor dining, but a limit of 4 people maximum per table. Those are the restrictions that the governor has put into place with today's announcements for 5 additional communities. I'm not going to repeat the orange level. It is more severe. Portchester is going through that right now. The hope and the expectation is that by our efforts and actions, we'll reduce the infection to a level sufficient to which an orange zone can be reduced to a yellow zone and a yellow zone can be lifted. And that would resume the normal circumstances. But the numbers that I've just given you tell us that we're moving in a different direction. And this isn't just those numbers that I shared are countywide numbers. They're not just limited to these 5 communities, and they do represent an increase in infection. It's clear. There's no ambiguity about it. And I think that, while there's always a debate in a small d democratic society, functionally speaking, there's really no purpose to debate any further. We have a rise in COVID cases. It's a serious rise. Additional steps have to be taken. How severe those regulatory steps are yet to be determined. And the governor's laid out a slow and steady process from the less severe to the more severe. We hope that we can work together to avoid going to the next level up, because clearly we don't want to see regulation. We don't want to see a contraction of education or business. All of those things are not good for us as a society. But what is even worse for us is rampant spreading of the COVID virus. And again, if you need an indicator, almost 1,500 people have died, 7 short. 1,500 people have died in Westchester County. When we had the peak nights back in the spring, it was a horrific scene. Now, for a person, if it hasn't touched your family life, I can understand how this is, sort of esoteric. It's cocktail conversation. It's something you think about and should read this or should you do that. But there have been many families in Westchester that have been touched by this. Somebody that they loved has died. Somebody that they hoped would be there for Thanksgiving won't be there for Thanksgiving. So the question that remains for us is, how do we conduct ourselves in light of that danger? Do we make intelligent and prudent decisions? A lot of folks have said to me, well, the government shouldn't force us. If the government gave you no legal requirement to do something, would you do it out of common sense? Would you do it on your own? And that's the question that everybody who's watching this and every American has to come to grips with. What do you believe is necessary? And if you can talk yourself out of wearing a mask, you will, in matter of fact, help spread the virus. And you have to understand that if there's no regulation by government, if there's no dad to tell you what to do, then you yourself have to know what's intelligent. Now, you can go on to the internet, you can consult Dr. Google and find whichever opinion is out there. There's 10,000 opinions on the internet. I'm sure you'll find one that suits your personal preference. But I think it's been proven now, I think, to satisfy anybody who wants to look at objective data. This airborne disease, rapidly contagious from one person to the next. You do not to touch the person to give them the contagion. You do not to exchange bodily fluids to give the contagion. This can be done in an airborne setting. I could sneeze here, walk out of the room. The next person, a few minutes later, that walks into this airspace could find that they have contracted the virus because of it. That is a reality. We can discuss it, we can argue about it, but that's a reality. And so these numbers point out the urgency of it, and the yellow zone designations are now a task for those of us in county government to try to respond to it, working with local governments, not superseding them, working with them as partners, and all of us together within the rubric of the state, and in this case, state governor. I want to touch on a couple of other points that I'm going to ask Deputy County Executive Ken Jenkins to talk about an innovative program that we've launched to try to further assist small businesses in this county. We know that the pandemic has had a negative effect on every aspect of life, and we are trying to figure out how do we respond to that in an intelligent way that could be productive. Let me mention a couple of other points. As of Friday, we're going to be opening our Emergency Operations Center located in Westchester County. It is a place where we have a variety of entities represented on a day-to-day basis so that they can talk amongst each other as we plan our response to the pandemic. We did not open the emergency operations centers for most of the time during the summer into the fall because we had seen a drop in the contagion. There was no urgency to do that. But now we will be opening it Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. We hold open the possibility of running it on a 24-hour basis if the crisis merits it. But obviously the general public can't go to this place. Just, sort of imagine what looks like a room that telemarketers work at, long desks, phones, and computers at each station, where you might, sit there to call somebody to try to sell them a timeshare. In this particular case, representatives of utilities, of major medical institutions, when it's fully operative, are all there to work together, consult with each other where we have overlap of problems. That's used whenever there's a hurricane. We do a drill every year to take care of the potential of something happening at Indian Point, and we pull the EOC together similarly now to deal with the concerns that we have about the extension of the contagion. And so that is going to open up, tomorrow on Friday. It's going to be open Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. Our Department of Public Safety, Department of Public Safety, which is our police department in the county, is always a functional part of that. Our Department of Health is always a functional part of that. Our Emergency Services Department and our Department of Social Services are always critical in there. And then we add other departments of county government. We add municipal government, utilities, as I've said, depending on the nature of the crisis and where we are. Now, we are unfortunately very close on December 1st to the start of the winter storm season. And as what usually happens, the EOC focuses on winter storms. I remember my first week in office, our first week in office, we had a snowstorm, and we were at the EOC to decide 4 days into our tenure, do we close county government, and what do we do about the problem? So we will certainly work through all of those things with all of our departments, Parks Department, and how we handle the ongoing responsibilities that we have in our Environmental Facilities Department to make sure garbage is transported, that sewage is treated, and all those things that might happen with that. But the EOC is open. Because of the increase in COVID cases, we have suspended all family visitation at the Westchester County Jail. That is effective this Monday, November 23rd. Each resident will receive a letter from our Commissioner, Joe Spano of Corrections, with a free phone call card and 2 stamped envelopes. They can maintain contact with their family members who were residents at the jail during the Thanksgiving holiday. This is, an unfortunate situation, but again, the spread of COVID, we have to lay on the side of what is prudent and what will be protective for the greatest number of people. There are visitation slots created, as you might imagine, in a secure facility. They must make sure that those who are there incarcerated remain separated and protected from those who might visit them, and that there's a closeness enough to visit, but and so they create certain slots, and volunteer services are provided there to do a host of different services. Those have been suspended. We have no active resident cases right now by anybody who is at the jail, but we don't want to risk that by having an outside presence, a contact that could, in theory, spread the contagion. And because you are in close quarters in a jail, a disease can spread very quickly if we're not on top of it. So that's the decision that's been made relative to the jail system. We are in the process now. Part of it is an outgrowth of those calls that I alluded to, that we're going to be delivering PPE inside these various communities, along with Portchester, that have been designated within the zones. We started that process last weekend with Portchester, and we will now continue with the rest. We're working out delivery of masks, and so they can be disseminated. Certain masks, the one I'm wearing, do get dirty, they get frayed, they have to be replaced. There are some cloth masks that you can wash and reuse, but we have to make sure that people have a full supply of those so that they can wear them. We don't need excuses. We don't need people saying, oh, I don't have the money to buy a mask, I didn't know where to get it. We have to make it easily acceptable and available to them so that they can solve that problem. So I'm going to ask Deputy County Executive Ken Jenkins to talk about the Westchester Rises program. This is another one of our innovative programs. I want to compliment Bridget Gibbons, who's our Director of Economic Development. She works with Joan McDonald and Emily Saltzman in our operations team, and she's already come up with other plans that have been very well received by the business community. This is yet another one to provide some support mechanisms. So, Deputy County Executive Ken Jenkins.
Thank you, County Executive. And certainly under County Executive Latimer's leadership and direction, these innovative programs to really deal with the issues of our small business community have come about. And as the County Executive just mentioned, under the direction and leadership of Bridget Gibbons. So Westchester Rises is another one of those programs, joining Business First and Business 1000 under the Westchester Catalyst banner. And this is focused on supporting local businesses struggling through our current economic crisis. So Westchester Rises is a free program designed to support existing businesses who are looking to pivot or rebuild in response to the pandemic, or build in additional resilience to prepare for whatever things come our way in this particular crisis. Westchester Rises is an association with Excel 7, a business and startup accelerator based in New Rochelle, and it's a mentoring and training program to support business owners who are reinventing, reinvigorating, or otherwise changing their business as a result of COVID-19. Danny Pataki, Managing Director of Excel 7, will lead the program, which will include numerous distinguished speakers and mentors. Through online workshops, industry roundtables, and one-on-one mentoring, the business owners and entrepreneurs will be able to gain the knowledge and skills necessary to plan their next steps, navigate core business challenges, and respond to the pandemic environment. Westchester Rises is going to be a 6-month virtual program, and business owners are invited to participate in as many or as few of the workshops and roundtables as they would like. The topics for the 10 online workshops include marketing your business in a pandemic, rehiring your team, and seeking funding in these challenging times. The Westchester Rises program is an important step in building resilience and equipping our businesses to respond to these future challenges. The first workshop is going to be held December 1st at 12 noon via Zoom, and will focus on engaging your team while navigating the pandemic economy. Participants are going to be able to register by visiting Westchester Rises, www.westchesterrises.com/workshops. So for more information on Westchester Rises, a complete schedule, make sure to visit westchesterrises.com, or certainly you can check in on westchestercatalyst.com and check in with Bridget Gibbons and our economic development gurus trying to help assist everyone through this pandemic. Thank you.
And as Ken pointed out, it bears repeating that our economic development team has looked for ways to be helpful to small businesses, businesses with 99 or less people, those that were thriving businesses prior to the onset of the pandemic. The Business First program has gone through one round of grants. There's another round coming up. We'll make those announcements whenever they're available. We had some money through our Westchester County IDA for small grants and loans that were directed for PPE purposes. We've had the Launch 100 program that was alluded to through our Workforce Development Board, and we're trying very hard to figure out how to be helpful, because we know businesses are severely impacted, and that affects not only the people that own the business and their ability to hold the business intact and the profit margins, but also the people who work for those businesses, since small business is a significant generator of income. We're working with our various chambers of commerces, as well as the major county business associations to try to be as helpful as we can in these things. And we don't believe that these programs are the beginning and the end of everything that's needed, but it shows the willingness that this government has to partner with business, as well as with not-for-profits and with the clergy and with all the other players in the society. Just want to make a comment about Thanksgiving before we go to questions. Catherine Chaffee, our Director of Communications, is here. We have sort of changed the format here for how we're approaching these reports. We do not want press physically in the room, because we don't want to endanger them from any potential virus transfer. We are reducing the number of people in the county office building from the workforce, but still to come into the building, it's a confined environment, and we want to make sure that our press friends have the ability to access the information we're sharing, can ask us questions, can do whatever their work is as they do it, but to do that in a safe environment. And I'm sure that the family members of the people who are reporting from the press will appreciate the fact that we don't want to put them in any additional harm or jeopardy by bringing them in. So While I'm finishing up my thoughts, by all means, contact Catherine Chaffee. She'll read the questions. We'll try to answer them as straightforward as we can. Thanksgiving is a week away, and Thanksgiving is perhaps the great secular holiday of the American experience. We all have our religious traditions. I'm Christian, so we celebrate Christmas as well as Easter in the spring. Our friends who are Jewish celebrate the High Holy Days as very important in the fall. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Passover in the spring. Hanukkah is a celebration that comes at the end of the year. My friends who are Muslim follow the Ramadan celebration and Eid, the various times when that is part of their celebration. And our friends who are Hindus and Buddhists and different other religious traditions all look at those things. But we all, as Americans, celebrate Independence Day. We take joy in Labor Day. We mourn on Memorial Day. And Thanksgiving is a tradition that we all have. We all remember as little children what Thanksgiving meant. And it has an extra special feeling for me personally because my birthday falls around this time of the year. And on occasion, my birthday falls on Thanksgiving Day, and I can remember very fondly growing up in a household where there was turkey and birthday cake, at the table. It was wonderful. And it means a lot to me. It means more to me now that both of my parents are gone. It means to me more now when I know that my sister and her family and my nephews are a few hundred miles away in Northern Virginia, when my daughter and her husband and my grandchildren are even further than that away in Kentucky. It is hard to know that holiday season is going to come. I'm not going to see my sister and my nephews and my brother-in-law, and we all get along well, surprisingly, and my sister and my two grandchildren, whom I love dearly. I wish my parents were alive so I could enjoy the pleasure of their company. But I also recognize that we are in a very difficult time. And what pleases me as an individual is something that I can't indulge right now. I can't do that. I cannot put other people in jeopardy or risk my own jeopardy by being in places where the pandemic could spread. Now, it is not within my authority nor within my disposition to order people what to do. My friends here who watch how I manage in this government is I'm loath to point at somebody and say, you will do this, the authority of the county executive. I much prefer when reasonable people discuss things through, come to common understanding. We work through whatever those differences are. As Ken will say, we're both recovering legislators. Legislators tend to think that way, collegial decision-making. Executives sometimes just give orders. So I'm not giving you an order, but I'm appealing to your common sense. I'm appealing to your good nature. I'm appealing to the fact that if you are like me and we are all the same, we love the people that we love. The spouses that we have, the children that we have, the siblings, cousins. If we're fortunate to have our parents, or if we're young enough, we have our grandparents. We love these people. These people are important to us. We've shared great moments together, births of children together. We have mourned together when members of our family die. And when we have a celebration like Thanksgiving, we want to be together. That is a natural human feeling, and it's a good natural human feeling. And I have the exact same feeling. I want to see the people that I love at a time of holiday. And of course, like many men, I like to eat turkey, watch NFL football, and fall asleep on the couch. That's where I celebrate Thanksgiving, as many men do. But I must tell you, I can't indulge that this year. You have to determine if you can indulge that this year. You have to look, not what the county executive says, what the person in the mirror, when you look at that person in the mirror in the morning, says. Do I bring my aged aunt into my house, or do I go to her house and potentially risk her life? It might not happen, but it might. Are you prepared to make that risk? Are you prepared when the son and the daughter that's away at college, whom you love, you haven't seen them since you sent them off to school in the early part of the fall, when they come back into your house and you love them just as much, can you be confident that they won't have a disease, that your older brother or sister, their uncle and aunt, might not pick up from them at that dinner table when you're passing the sweet potato pie and you're passing the dressing for the turkey? Because the truth of the matter is you don't know that, and neither do I. Even if I had a COVID test and got my results back just before Thanksgiving, I wouldn't know for sure that the disease wasn't incubating in me, and neither do you. Now, the governor doesn't know either. The governor can set certain orders in place, and some folks can react to what the governor says. That's democracy, small d democracy. But inside of you, you have to make a decision. And you have to know what the risk is and what the reward is. The reward is that you will be with your family. And it wasn't on Easter Sunday. It wasn't watching fireworks on July 4th. We gave those up. Being a virus extraction, it wasn't on St. Patrick's Day. For my friends who are Mexican, it wasn't on Cinco de Mayo to celebrate together. We couldn't be in the shul for Yom Kippur. And we couldn't have the first night of Passover together as a family, although I'm not Jewish. Those are important collection moments. We sacrificed all of those things because of this virus. And there's more sacrifice ahead of us. You know, after Thanksgiving comes the Christmas holiday season, which has both a secular element to it and a religious element to it. And these are important things. And there's New Year's. And if anybody wants to see old year 2020 leave, I want to meet the person that wants more 2020. We all want to be into a new year. We want to see something better than New Year. We have to determine individually what makes sense. That's what I encourage you to do. I don't tell you what to do. You do what you think is right, but think about it. Think about a virus that you can't see, you can't taste it, you don't know if you have it or you don't, unless it affects you a certain way. And when you touch a surface, you don't know if somebody else touched that same surface just before you did. That's what you're risking when your beloved uncle comes. That's what you're risking when you see your mom and dad of aged years. That's what you're risking with an immune suspect friend that you've invited over. Somebody who is going through cancer treatments, somebody who may have HIV. That's what you're risking. Ask yourself, is it worth it? You want to give thanks. That's what you want to do. You can give thanks in your heart. You can give thanks in the way you treat people every day. You don't have to wake up mad. You don't have to call in a radio program to express your anger. You can give thanks and you can be happy that you have what you have, because at this moment in time, if you're watching this and I'm standing here, we're alive. But so were 1,500 people on March 1st who are not alive now. Think about it. Let's go to questions.
The first question comes from Barrett Seaman from the Hudson Independent. Why was Sleepy Hollow not designated when its numbers are much higher than Tarrytown, which was designated?
Well, Barrett, I'm afraid that the verbal designation of Tarrytown was based on the zip code 10591. The reality is that the zone that was created covers both Tarrytown and Sleepy Hollow. Not all of both, but significant portions of downtown Sleepy Hollow and portion of Tarrytown. If you look at the map, and if you need a copy of the map, we'll get you a copy of it so that you see it. You'll see that the designation covers both. What happened in the way it was announced as zip code 10591, which is generally announced as Tarrytown. It is the same thing that happened in Port Chester a week ago. Port Chester was announced, the Port Chester zip 10573 is known as a Port Chester zip. However, it also includes the village of Rye Brook. And if you sometimes, not that you're going to do this, you go into the white pages, if they exist in hard copy, they'll give addresses in Rye Brook as Port Chester because they go by the zip 10573. So in this case, the bulk of Sleepy Hollow, along with the bulk of Tarrytown, is in the yellow zone. It does affect the institutions in both of those two communities, and we are addressing the issues of this particular zone as Tarrytown Sleepy Hollow zones. We're going to be on a call later today with the Chamber of Commerce. It's known as TASH, Tarrytown Sleepy Hollow. That's also the way we describe the farmers market at Patriots Park on Saturdays, TASH, and we are treating this as a Tarrytown Sleepy Hollow effort that has to be addressed.
The next question is also from Barrett. Since yellow zone designation brings with it a requirement that students in in-person schooling be tested periodically, is there any compensation for the costs of those tests, or must the school districts find the money for those tests in their existing budgets?
Well, we're working right now with school districts to try to help provide the testing that they need for districts that remain open either by full in-person teaching or by hybrid teaching. Now, I'm not conversant in what the school district in that area is doing right now. Port Chester is not an example because they moved into the orange zone, which closes the schools. The other four districts alongside of Tarrytown and Sleepy Hollow that have been identified are each now making those decisions about that. It's not simply a matter of the school district is on their own. The state, the governors made the designation of the zone. we have, as I alluded to before, we have encouraged a common conversation, county, town, village, school district, not-for-profit organizations, businesses, other entities, to dialogue about this. And we are working with the school districts to help them satisfy the testing requirements that the state has established. We're going to be working through physical health delivery institutions in the area that you're covering for the Hudson Independent. It would be Open Door in Sleepy Hollow. It could be Phelps Hospital. If we're talking about Yonkers, we have a couple of hospitals, St. John's, St. Joe's, other institutions that might be part of that partnership. When we talk about New Rochelle, Montefiore, New Rochelle, major hospital in New Rochelle. But there is no structure for how the reimbursements is going to work. This is what we work out together. So I can't tell you specifically that the state will pay for a certain amount of this testing. The county, through the County Department of Health, will try to make tests available if we can get them at no cost. I think that's our intent, to try to do that and to solve that. But it is not simply good luck, school district, you're on your own. It is the partnership between the municipality, the school district, and the county. And then we, as sibling governments, approach the state and look for assistance and, what resources we have. Ken, do you want to add to that?
No, you might want to mention the conversations we've been having with the school district since March, since the very beginning of it. So it's not new.
Yeah, no, this is, as Ken points out, the collaboration between the school district and the county is not new. We met back in March with the school districts. They were having some issues as how they wanted to approach things, and they were trying very hard. There's 44 school districts that cover Westchester. A couple of them go into Putnam County. And they were trying to have sort of a common approach to some of these issues rather than school district A do this and school district B do this. And they were a little frustrated. They had to get rulings from the state of New York Education Department, which covers, 700, 800 school districts in the state, maybe more than that. And they could not get their information in real time. So we stepped in to try to serve as a partner in these things. And we have, as Ken was pointing out, been doing this over a period of time with them. And this falls into the same category of how we're trying to address it. So it's not simply the school districts are on their own, but we are trying to partner with them. But we have not yet gotten to the testing module in a yellow zone yet. We went from yellow to orange so quickly in Portchester that it didn't manifest itself. And the state just changed the reporting requirements, the testing requirements on Monday during the day, and they stretched out the time frame to satisfy the testing of a certain percentage of people. So how that's actually going to work is yet to be determined, but we are working on that cooperatively. It is not merely just the cost drops to the school districts by itself and then goodbye.
The next question comes from Dan Murphy. What percentage of the population has to test positive for the area to be designated a red zone?
Let's see if it's listed in my notes here. I don't know if I've got a hard number of what that represents, Dan. I don't see it offhand. That's a good question. We are not close to red zone designation at this stage of the game, so we'll follow up with you directly on that, and anybody else in the press that would like to have that information, we will try to identify it for you. I will tell you that the designation and the moving from non-zone to yellow zone, yellow to orange to red, generally is made with certain parameters in mind, but they are decisions made by the governor and the people around him. So it is not simply a set of metrics that when you cross a certain line, you have automatically moved from zone to zone. It is a designation that the state government, through the governor, makes based on the numbers that they look at, and there may be some subjective reasons why a specific number might not trigger a zone, or a lower number might trigger a zone, and that is within the authority of the governor using his statewide executive powers. But we'll try to get you the specific information about red zone. Fortunately, none of the areas right now appear to be under threat of going to the extreme red zone. And by the way, under the red zone, I didn't mention this, all non-essential gatherings are prohibited. All schools are closed. There's only takeout and delivery in restaurants. This is very analogous to the shutdown that we saw before. Non-essential businesses are closed, so pharmacies and certain other types of things are kept open, but other businesses are shut down. We will do everything we can to avoid red zone designation.
The next question comes from Samantha from News 12. She asks, can you name specific zip codes that are in the newly named yellow zones?
Well, in the Tarrytown Sleepy Hollow zone, as I mentioned, the zip code is 10591. Not all of 10591 is in the zip code for Tarrytown. The New Rochelle zip code that was identified as 10801. Again, it is not all of 10801, but it is most of 10801. And based on our review of the map, it does not include 10804, which is northern New Rochelle, or 10805, which is southern or south central to southwest New Rochelle. Those geographies don't exist in common language, but those zip codes apply. Ossining zip is 10562. And it includes, I would say this particular zone includes, again, most of 10562. Briarcliff Manor has a separate zip code zone. There are people who have children in Ossining schools who might live in the town of Newcastle. And depending on what their street address is and whether they have an Ossining zip or not, but the Ossining one is circulated around Ossining. And then, of course, in Yonkers, we have two zip codes. Ken, what are the zip codes in Yonkers?
10705 and 10703 in general, again, because they're not all encompassing, and the zip codes look like amoebas. So
Okay. 10703, 10705 in Yonkers. And of course, Yonkers is a large community, lots of different zip codes in Yonkers. We've had this conversation, Samantha. I've been on a number of calls with PTA representatives, different schools. We had this conversation with Bronxville a couple of nights ago. Bronxville zip is 10708, but there's a significant section of Yonkers that falls within 10708. So when somebody hears Yonkers is a yellow zone, the zip codes matter, and it matters whether or not the way they've done the actual zone covers all of the zip code or some of the zip code. So each one of these are very specific situations. I did not mean to skip Peekskill. I believe Peekskill zip code is 10566. And again, the urban part of Peekskill is in this, but the zip code covers the whole of the city. So those are the zip codes that, as I understand. And this is a test of your county executive. Does he know his zip codes? I hope I passed.
The next question comes from David Proper. Besides social gatherings, are there other places or activities this virus is commonly spreading?
Well, what we've heard from the governor is his concerns have focused around bars. And I think we can all understand that when you go to a bar, I have been to more than one or two in my life, it is a social gathering where people are in close quarters. They're consuming alcohol, they're watching a sporting event, or they're celebrating somebody's special activity, and or just socializing late at night. And the closeness, the physical contact in a bar is an ideal place to spread a disease. And to be candid, very few times do you go to a bar and to be up close and personal with friends or people and then wear a mask and socially distance. So it's almost antithetical to go to a bar and then to have to practice these same situations. However, restaurants that have alcohol and those that have bars attached to restaurants, bars are a very profitable part of the business. Just from a pure technical standpoint, the markup on alcohol is tremendous. People buy a glass of wine for $11, and the cost of putting the wine in the glass is minimal, and so it's very profitable for the business. So I think the governor has identified bars are a source of concern. He's also identified that gyms and health clubs are a source of concern, in that you have people who are working out and in the process of exercising, they're sweating and they're really potentially infecting people around them in some close quarters. You're using equipment and somebody else uses the same equipment. The sanitization process has to be very thorough between uses, so that the person who's just been on the treadmill or the bike or whatever the device is not potentially leaving behind something for the next person. Many times there's a concentration at a health club. Early in the morning, a lot of people are there. At the end of the workday, a lot of people are there. And so people are in very close quarters, lockers and showers and a host of things. And he's identified health clubs and gyms as being a source of concern as he's laid them out. Now, I refer to the governor because he said these things and he identified them as areas where the spread could happen. Besides social gatherings, those are the three, I believe, that he pointed out. When you look at what happens in a red zone, in a yellow zone, what has been determined by the state to be high-risk, non-essential business, that gives you a clue as to what the concerns are. There are concerns over barbershops, hair salons, personal care services. I assume that means nails and tattoos, things of that nature. Those were stores that were closed in the first couple of zones probably the first couple of phases back in the spring. We had phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of opening. They are identified as things that would close under the orange zone. So, David, I would interpret it to mean that those are areas where there's a concern about the spread because of the nature of the service. When you cut somebody's hair or shape somebody's hair, the hairdresser, the barber is in close personal contact with the person, and there may be a row of people doing that inside a setting, and there's the same would be true at a nail salon and so forth. So I interpret that to mean those are some of the areas where this can happen. I think there's also a concern from what happens at college campuses, particularly when you're away at school. Pretty clearly, those of a certain age feel less vulnerable to the disease, are less likely to practice social distancing, that age in your life. Social connectiveness is very important. And then returning home to your family's home for Thanksgiving, holiday season, and so forth is a concern that might bring the infection, into a home with older adults and things of that nature. So I think those are some of the points we can deal with. We have, as a government, dealt with the area of public interaction that we control. We were very specific all spring and summer about which things we would open and which things we would close. We closed Playland Amusement Park. We closed the ethnic festivals at Kensico Dam because we knew that those would be public events where people were in close quarters. And then we allowed those events where we felt there was intrinsic social distancing, golf, bicycling, and so forth. We canceled fireworks displays because we felt that would have people in close quarters. So what's happened is on the public side, we have reduced areas of interaction. We've reduced certain festivals and ceremonies and parades. Virus still spreads. So how is it spreading? What are the other things that humans do that put them in close personal connection with other people? Because that's how the virus spreads. And I think that's what the governor's trying to get at by pinpointing some of these other areas.
The next question comes from Rebecca Solomon. What is the county's current positive infection rate? What does that mean, and how does that impact the average citizen?
Well, the most recent infection rate, I think it was a daily rate that I saw, Becca, was 4.6% the last time that the tracker came up. I don't know that's the rolling 7-day average or rolling 3-day average, and if you need to have that particular statistic, we can find that for you offline so that you can have the accurate update for your story. The infection rate is an indicator, and I think I had one of these addresses a while back where I went through a series of indicators. What's the total number of cases, active cases? Then I talked about what's the rate of infection, then the rate of hospitalization, and then the rate of fatalities as additional statistics that give you a greater picture. You can't take any one statistic, pull it out, and that's the only statistic to look at. You have to look at all those in sequence. There was a time when we had a high number of active cases, but a relatively low infection rate, which means, in essence, we weren't adding more people to the pipeline of those infected. Or it meant that we did not have as many people who were hospitalized based on being infected, which is a good sign. It means the severity wasn't there. Then, of course, we had a low number of fatalities. We may have had a lot of people hospitalized, but they recovered and they went home. So that's why each of these statistics matters. The infection percentage is very important to the state because it talks about how much of it is spreading and what is likely to happen in the coming days if the percentages continue to rise. And you never look at a one-day situation. You could have a spike in a given day for whatever reason, I don't know. But I'll give you an example of something. Let's say you had an outbreak and you decided you needed to test 20 people that were part of that outbreak. Those 20 people test positive, that might skew your number, say of 100. That could skew your number. We had 20% infection rate for one day because we tested people within a particular cohort that were likely to have the disease because we wanted to isolate them and so forth. So you look at it over a longer period of time. If the infection rate stays consistently high, it tells you have a spread of the infection. If it spikes up a day or not, then you had an incident. People were at a particular place and they got infected, but it wasn't across the board. And all of this is very subjective. And I must add, in all of these situations, I've said this before, but it bears repeating, we draw our statistical information from the state. The state has the reporting going into them. The hospitals report fatalities to them. The testing centers, of which there are many different ones now, report their information into the state. The state does, the people who work for the state health department, collates the information statewide, from Erie to Montauk to Ogdensburg to our neck of the woods. and correlates that into the data that we see on the tracker every day. And then we have additional information that's sent to us in terms of positive cases. Now, we have individual cases, but the ability to look through individual cases and try to piece together a narrative based on what we're seeing is very difficult. If we were to see 10 people at the same address, that could mean a family infection, that it affected me, and then the people who live in my family unit are also infected. But you don't know that from just the raw numbers. You'd have to look at how those numbers got put together. We don't have enough of that data to do the independent analysis, so we track every day. On my sheet, I feel like Kornacki at the board, looking at numbers. But I have handwritten, that's my penmanship, dating back over 8 months. This is the habit I got in my business life, where I track numbers every day on the different projects I was assigned, and we had indicators to tell us what we're doing better, what we're doing worse, and then what do we do about it. But in tracking those numbers, the infection rate has clearly gone up. And as I mentioned in the specific, the last numbers we had, 7,300 people tested, 360 people tested positive. I will arbitrarily go back on my little sheet 3 months, just for the laughs. I'll go back to a date 3 months before that, and I will show that we had 4,340 people tested and 26 people having the disease. So that gives you an idea of the difference. 26 out of 4,300, 360 out of 7,300. Big difference. That's the infection rate in effect.
And the last question comes from Mario from the Journal News. A number of retail centers like the Westchester have opted to close on Thanksgiving and open the morning of Black Friday. These 2 days tend to be the biggest days for shopping year-round, which means influx of tax revenue for the county. So can you talk about balancing holiday shopping while being realistic about COVID and their impact to the county tax revenues?
Well, the impact of losing sales tax revenue is tremendous on the county. But in any hierarchy of what's important, public health outranks public wealth. We have to prioritize, even if it's to some degree sacrificial, our economics in quest of trying to keep the greatest number of people alive. We do know that Black Friday, I don't know why they call it that, but the Friday after Thanksgiving is a tremendous shopping day. And now we have Small Business Saturday and Cyber Monday and a host of other days that have been identified as the post-Thanksgiving, the beginning of the Christmas holiday shopping season. Because we have the capacity for internet sales, which does not benefit all retailers equally. There are certain stores that have a very strong, the bigger the store, certainly a very strong internet presence. A mom and pop store may not have that presence and may not be able to compete for those types of things. But because there is online sales, and it's because it's becoming a larger portion as a percentage of all the sales, that in theory is not impacted by what happens from that Friday after Thanksgiving. And of course, I am not a shopper on the first day. I'm usually a shopper on the last day of the holiday season or next to the last day. I always get a kick out of the fact that stores opened at 12 noon on Friday, then they opened at 6 a.m. on Friday, then they opened midnight of Thanksgiving night. Now it's like digest your turkey because the store's open at 8 o'clock. There are 40 days, or maybe not that much, 30 days to the shopping season of the holidays, and if you didn't get there at 8 o'clock on Thanksgiving night, would that be the end of your world? But professional shoppers tell me that it is. So I do think to put balance into it, that we expect to have a less than robust holiday shopping season. It is the most important month of the year for us in terms of sales tax revenue. We know that we expect it to be down. We have projected it to be down over the last couple of years. How far down will be determined by how comfortable people feel going out into the public. And of course, to have a second wave or spike in COVID couldn't happen at a worse time economically. Things start to slack off after the holiday season, and it would impact the economy much less were this to happen in January. But it is what it is. But again, we're going to defer on the side of public health. And if decisions are made to shut certain things down, they'll be made by a higher level than me. If I have an input, I'll be happy to give my input. If it falls within our responsibilities, we will make those decisions, and we'll take responsibility for the wisdom or the foolishness of those decisions. But if it comes down to having to close something because we have runaway infection and runaway deaths, As I said once before, the memory of seeing refrigerator trucks filled with those who had died, and that the capacity did not exist to bury them or cremate them in a timely fashion, that stands out to me, unfortunately, as the singular remembrance of 2020 in my mind. And I cannot equate that to looking at a ledger sheet and saying we're off by X million dollars. What are we going to do? Well, we'll come up with some financial strategy to deal with this, but we can't get those bodies back. We can't bring them back to life. So let's try to have as few of those bodies as we can. So therefore, I err on the side, Mario, of public health over wealth. With that, we thank you for your questions. We did our best to answer them. There were a couple of questions that were asked for which there's statistical information. Please contact Catherine Chaffee when this is over. It may take us a little while to get the exact number, but we'll be happy to give you the number that you need. Anybody in the press who did not have a specific question, but they have a desire to talk to one of us or anybody in our administration, reach out to us after this is over. We'll try to be communicative. We will be back here on Monday for the next update. And then next week, because of Thanksgiving holiday, we'll have our second week update in Wednesday, midweek. We have done an interview. I've done an interview with Dr. Charlita Amler, our Commissioner of Health. We did it yesterday. It's on Facebook if you're so inclined to watch. About a half-an-hour interview. We talk a little bit about some of these issues, and of course, she is the health professional that guides our public health policy here in the county. So you'll find that interesting at another level. Absent that, we wish you a healthy day and a good weekend ahead. Although there's another work week day ahead of us before the weekend comes. And if you have any questions, certainly for Ken or myself or any member of our team, reach out to us. We will try to answer it to the best of our ability. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Think about what I said. Think about what I said. Analyze it for yourself. Use your best judgment. That'll be your best guide. Thank you. Have a good day.